October 13, 2010. It's a committee of the whole meeting. If you could all please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance, please. Thank you. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And to make our meeting official, I'd ask Clerk Spencer to call the roll, please.
Utenkoff. Here. Peasant. Here. Shea. Absent. Leader.
Here.
Rose. Here. Graham.
Here.
Hipskin.
Here.
York.
Here.
Healy.
Here.
Morley.
Here.
Kennedy.
Here.
Mulliner.
Here.
Wagner. Absent. 11 present and 2 absent.
11 present, 2 absent. We have an official quorum. Before I go on to the first item on the agenda, I just wanted to kind of set the level of expectations tonight for our timing. We have a lot going on tonight. We have ComEd here, who I'm going to introduce here in a few minutes, Mr. O'Halloran and the folks from ComEd. But we intend to have this committee, the whole meeting, go till about 8 o'clock today, where we will adjourn, have limited time for questions, depending on how the presentation goes along here. And then afterwards, after we adjourn, there'll be about a 15-minute time for the task force and ComEd to interact. Committees will start promptly at 8 o'clock. We have a Finance Committee meeting. We have, I believe, Public Affairs and Safety was canceled, but the Public Works meeting will go on today. So those committees will go on, and also DPZ. Alderman Morley, okay?
I got issues.
Okay. And then at 8:15, the selection committee for the stormwater engineer will actually meet. So if there's questions on the task force, we will have more interaction with ComEd after the first of the year as well, where we'll be breaking into subgroups, and one of those groups is going to be ComEd, another one will be storm sanitary, another one, finance, et cetera. So ComEd will be a subgroup, and there will be more interaction as well. So don't feel that we have to get all of our questions answered tonight with ComEd. There will be time afterwards if whatever it is doesn't take place before 8 o'clock. And then again, a lot more intimacy with the subcommittee with the task force, which will be meeting after the first of the year and digging in with the permanent engineering firm that we selected this evening. So with that, on to our committee report by ComEd. Mr. O'Halloran, take it away, sir.
Well, thank you, Mayor DeCiani. As you indicated, my name is John O'Halloran, External Affairs Manager for ComEd, handle City of Elmhurst and a number of other cities in DuPage County. I'm joined tonight by a couple of my colleagues, Jose Andrade, the Director of External Affairs for South Region, and Drew Zamolik, our Reliability Manager for the area. And we've got a presentation, kind of summarize the summer storm events and some plans for a number of the circuits that serve portions of Elmhurst. Okay. Very good. Okay, thank you. Just some background on the electrical service of the City of Elmhurst. We serve the city from 11 stations. Those are the substations that range anywhere from Bellwood, Oakbrook, Villa Park, Addison, down on Church Road. These are where the high voltage feeder lines come in, and then they're stepped down by the station transformers, and they branch off into either 4,000 volt circuits, 12,000 volt circuits, or a few 34,000 volt circuits that go off into the neighborhoods and serve the customers. The idea here is just to indicate that we've got a number of sources where the power into the community comes from. So if, God forbid, we lost a station, the entire town wouldn't go black. Generally, larger communities where we have that kind of redundancy, and the circuits in the field are networked, so we have switching capabilities that ties the circuits together. But from a high-level view, a robust, redundant distribution network throughout the community. ComEd, we're an engineering-based company. Engineers love numbers, and two of our metrics that we use to describe reliability are SAIFI and CATI. And SAIFI, as indicated down toward the bottom, is the average interruption frequency index, the number of interruptions per customer on an annual basis, and then CATI is the duration of those interruptions. And our goal as a company is to keep those numbers low. We want the average customer to have as few interruptions as possible in the course of a year, and when those outages occur, for them to be as short as possible. In addition to just overall SAIFI and CATI, we break it out by non-storm and storm. And this chart, the top row, non-storm SAIFI, that's a calculation of, on average, the average customer in the community, how many outages they have over the course of the year, and going back to 2005. And year-to-date 2010, for non-storm caused outages, the SAIFI is about 1.13, as indicated in the center, slightly higher than the average of about 0.91 over the course of those years. Let's see if we can get that to show up. Okay, so 1.13 customers. The average customers had a little over one outage caused by non-storm factors. The second row, the storm SAIFI, is what's the contribution of storm-related events to the customer's average number of interruptions. And due to the storms that we had in June, the storm-caused outages was a little over one, so about the same number of outages caused by non-storm and storm-related issues. That 1.15 for the storm SAIFI, higher than even 2007 when we had what we call the August blast in 2007 that hit Elmhurst as well as many of the other communities. The two storms actually in June, the combined effect of those two storms was worse than the 2007 storm. The CATI, the bottom row, is measured in terms of minutes, and again, that's the average interruption duration, and again, this includes storms, and that that kicked that number up high. The June storms kicked that number up high for this year. Not as high as the 2007 value, but still well above the average. Just some information on those storms that we did have back in June. Very impressive weather event. The bottom picture of the Bow Echo cloud formation as it came in, and then the radar showing the oncoming storm. Our company very tied to weather conditions, be it winter cold and wind like we had this weekend, or summer storm, summer heat, and we're constantly monitoring the weather forecast. And when we see this type of thing come, we're in a storm response mode from the second that thing, gets, let's say, in Iowa. I mean, we're already planning for what it can do to the service territory. Just some numbers of that storm. About 1 million customers were interrupted between that Friday the 18th and Sunday the 28th, system-wide over the ComEd system. About 120,000 lightning strokes were recorded. We have various programs that record that kind of information for us. And wind speeds, obviously, 70 to 80 mile an hour. The chart at the bottom shows customers without power on 1 hour increments. And the far left, lower left-hand corner, the morning of June 18th, 0, a few customers out. And then once the storm starts hitting the western part of the state, western part of our service territory, that number goes up. And then as it hits the metropolitan region, it spikes. So, late in the day, early evening on that 18th, we had well over 300,000 customers out of service. And then we just worked that number down progressively through the the ensuing days. We had a little bit of a bump on the 21st, another little storm, and then that Wednesday storm hit about the same time, maybe a little later on that Wednesday. Not as severe, but still enough to cause well over 100,000 customer interruptions. Unfortunately, many of those customers were out in that June 18th storm. We worked like devils to get them back on the 20th, 21st, and then boom, they're out again on Wednesday the 23rd, and then restored them throughout that restoration period. Some numbers on the storm damage. Again, system-wide, 550 poles, 113 transformers, 75 miles of wire and cable, and then a number of transmission structures damaged. These carry the high voltage, 138,000 volt transmission lines that move power not just on a local basis but on a regional basis. So those are obviously a very high priority. When those are affected, we work to get those back in service, since they tie the region and they feed the substations that serve the local areas. This is what I call an all hands on deck kind of a event. 450 crews were used during the restoration efforts. Contract crews come in from other states. The field crews work they work 16-hour shifts, 16 hours on, 8 hours off throughout the process, and we stagger those shifts so there are people working around the clock. We can get more work done during the day, so we have more people working during the day, but we still are working overnight hours as well. And then in addition to the field people, office personnel are working to put together the work packets, make sure that the equipment is available when the crew pulls up to the job site to do the job. All hands on deck. Some information specific to Elmhurst through that period. Again, the storm event had a great impact on the safety, the average number of interruptions, and there were 131 outages tagged to the city in that period from the 18th to the 27th, affecting almost 20,000 customers. The second bullet kind of says in all of 2010, there were 173 outages, so almost as many outages in that 9-day period as there were over that entire 10-day period as there were over the entire year. 20 of the outages were lockouts. A lockout means the entire line goes out of service. The circuits start at the substations and they branch out into the neighborhoods. When the entire circuit is out of service, we call that a lockout. Can affect anywhere from 200, 500, 1,000 or more customers on a circuit, and those are obviously high priorities because we want to get that circuit back in service as quickly as possible. Causes, as you can imagine, tree vegetation related outages affected almost 7,500 customers, and then the lightning and wind related outages about 10,000 customers. Lightning strikes, obviously not good for overhead equipment. Wind-related outages, either breaking poles or blowing wire off of poles. Tree and vegetation-related outages are either tree limbs, tree branches, or uprooted trees coming onto the lines and taking them down. Outages by device type, like I said, 20 lockouts where the entire feeder was affected. 36 fuse outages. That's the fuse breaks the feeder up as it goes into a neighborhood, for instance. Transformer outages are outages that occur at a transformer level, an overhead transformer generally in a backyard, either hit by lightning, a tree comes down and takes the transformer out. Switch outages are similar to the fuse outages. Those are devices used to break up the feeders. And then service outages are individual service equipment the overhead drop to the house where the wire connects to the house. So about 35 customers had just that problem, as well as some of those other problems with transformers or feeder level problems. In addition to the storm activities, we've met with the city a number of times about some pocket reliability areas, and we'll get into some of the specifics there. With the exception of those August 2007 storms and the June storms, reliability aligned with the past, and from our metrics, pretty good. What we do is we identify where are those pocket areas that are driving up those numbers, and we found, and you found, southwest area of Elmhurst, small part of central east Elmhurst, were impacted by the storms and some other issues over the last couple of years. We've worked over those last couple of years with the city to identify opportunities for improvement in those areas, and we've got additional work that we'll go into. We've got 4 circuits that we've identified both ourselves and in conjunction with the city. The first one, W3521, is in that central east area, and the other 3 are in the southwest part of town. First one is that Whiskey 3521. This year it's had 2 lockouts, again, where the entire circuit was out of service. One due to a lightning strike, one down to tree limbs during the storm, and then 2 previous ones earlier this year due to trees. We patrol the circuits after outages like this, and we try to identify any trees that might require trimming right now, spot trimming that can't wait for our trimming cycle. We've identified a couple of spots on that feeder, accelerated the spot trimming, and that's been completed. We trim on, there are 2 tree trimming programs. One is the 4-year cycle, where we trim we trim the entire feeder from the substation into the backyards and clear to prevent trees from growing up or into the lines. And then the other trimming program is a 2-year cycle, where we look at the main stem of the feeder, not necessarily the branches into the neighborhoods, and we try to identify any fast-growing trees that could give us problems. So we've got contractors that do that trimming work, the 4-year and the 2-year cycle. We've also got some devices, what we call trip saver fuses. These are more sophisticated fuses than what is already in place now, breaking up the feeders. Right now, for instance, a tree branch hits an overhead line in a backyard. If it's a sufficient of enough hit, it'll blow the fuse and take those customers out of service. That could be 50 customers, could be 100 customers. Whatever quantity of customers is protected by that fuse are out of service. The trip saver fuses are a more sophisticated fuse. It doesn't trip on that first contact. It acts as like the circuit breaker at the substation, where it opens up for a few seconds, closes back in the hope that the limb or whatever the problem is has burned away, cleared away, and can stay closed. If for some reason that branch is still on that line, then the trip saver fuse senses that, opens up again, another couple of seconds, and closes back in. And if that line is still impacted by that tree branch, for example, then on the 3rd time the trip saver fuse opens up, and then that line goes out of service. The intention of installing the trip saver fuse is to prevent that one branch contact from opening that fuse and taking those customers out of service. The customers will see those momentary interruptions, but there's a chance that they won't have that long-term interruption due to the contact. So we have done an engineering analysis of the feeder, and we've identified a couple locations that could benefit from the trip saver fuses, and we plan to have those installed first quarter of next year. Again, this is in the central east portion. The approximate boundaries of the area are shown, and we've got maps we can show you afterwards if there are specific questions. Second feeder is one of the three down in that 5th and 7th Ward area. Since 2008, 5 lockouts, again, totally out of service. 2 of them occurred on that, during that storm period in June, and then 2 of them were due to underground cables, one in January and one in June of 2009, and then a storm-related outage in the storm we had a year ago, June. Again, we did the circuit patrol after the June 2010 storm, didn't find any latent issues. Cable fault that occurred on January 26 was the same section that faulted about 6-7 months previous. We can do a diagnostic test to validate the health of the cable, if you will. We did that, and it did pass the test at that time. Again, rough boundaries of the circuit. Whiskey 668 X-ray, one of our circuits down in the 7th Ward that we've looked at in the past. As you know, was hit pretty hard during the storms in June. I was down in the Oak Brook area that this feeder goes through as well, and there were, I tell people, there were 14-inch trees broken at a 90-degree angle 4 feet off the ground. I've lived here my entire life. I've never seen anything like that in my life, but there were some incredible winds that went through to be able to do that kind of damage, breaking poles, taking down wires, just causing general havoc on the lines. So that was the most recent outage. We had another 2 outage set earlier this year where there's a portion of the overhead wire just north of the tollway came down. We inspected that, and we replaced that section of wire over the creek just north of the highway. That work was done in April. And then we've got this scheduled for the full cycle trim where we do the entire feeder substation out to the backyards in February. And we did do some spot trimming after the storms this summer. Again, we've got 3 locations that can benefit from those installation of those trip saver fuses. And again, plan to have those in before April 1st. And we've got a plan to install a mid-circuit recloser, some automated switches on the poles that will isolate the feeder in case there is a problem and limit the number of customers affected that we expect to have installed in the 2nd quarter of next year. The 3rd and final circuit down that area, Whiskey 6610 Yankee. Again, 5 lockouts since January of 2008. Storm outage, this one in the July storm. Equipment failure in July. Underground fault, tree contact during the June 2009 storm, and then a wildlife contact in September of 2008. Again, due for cycle trimming in 2011, and some spot trimming done prior to that. And again, 4 locations that can benefit from the trip saver fuses. These again are designed to protect, and it varies by the installation, anywhere from 50 to 100 customers from a sustained outage. And this feeder and the previous one is are the 2 that we're looking to install the mid-circuit recloser distribution automation on. And again, the boundaries. There have been questions at some of the meetings that we'd had about the 4,000 volt system. Most of our distribution is the 12,000 volt system. In some areas in the town, we've got 4,000 volts primary system that runs through the backyards. And Drew and his team did an analysis of the 4,000 volt system and found that about 25% of the customers are served from the 4 kV system. And in terms, again, of the outages per year, the Safety and Katy, the Safety, about 3 outages per year per circuit over that 5-year period, less than a half a lockout per year, so less than one time the circuit locked out on the 4 kV system, and the SAFE about 0.83, again less than 1. And only, of those 17 circuits, only 5 had a SAFE of greater than 1, so only 5 of those circuits had, the customers on only 5 of those circuits had more than one average outage over those years. We've got a number of programs that we implement on an annual basis for reliability. 3 of them are listed here. The circuit patrol, feeder inspections, done every 4 years by our maintenance inspectors. They go from the substation out into the field. They look for any damaged, degraded equipment, poles, transformers, anything that needs repair or replacement. Once those kinds of work is identified, the tasks are planned, and then we have a number of corrective maintenance programs that those items can fall under. Vegetation management, like I said, we do the complete circuit trim every 4 years based on the growth pattern of the trees. The 2-year cycle is just the main line and not the taps. Tree trimming, the tree trimming that we do, like I said, is designed to provide safe and reliable power. It's not going to prevent tree contact on a summer storm when the winds are reaching 50, 60, 70 miles an hour and the trees are coming down or large branches are breaking off. One thing that we do share with the municipalities is that we're trimming the trees that are in the easement or adjacent to the easement. There can be cases where customers have their own trees that are in a state of disrepair or dead or dying, and there's a potential that even though they're 10, 20 or more feet away from the lines, in the right conditions, they could come down and cause problems. We try to identify those kinds of cases, and if we do, we work with the municipality as best we can and the homeowner to have those addressed. The tap fusing, again, it's the attempt to break up those mainline feeders so that an outage in a small area doesn't cause the entire circuit to blow. Similar to in your homes, how you've got circuit breakers, so if something happens in the bathroom, it doesn't necessarily take out the power in the whole house. These tap fuses are the basic model, if you will, and then the enhanced model are those trip saver fuses. A couple other things that aren't listed are capacity planning. We get questions sometimes, are these outages caused by not enough power in the lines? We've got an entire capacity planning department that does nothing but looks at the capacity of the lines and says how much power is going through them, how much power is going to need to be coming through them in the future, and what needs to be done to accommodate that power. With the recession and the economic slowdown, their work has kind of slowed down because we aren't adding as much load as we have in the past. But their job is to make sure on that hot summer day, when everybody cranks on their air conditioning, the whole system doesn't go down as a result. Another thing we do is thermal scanning of the lines. We've got a department that does nothing but goes out with high-tech cameras and checks the lines, looking for any hot spots, something that, a connection that's going bad, a transformer that's overloaded, that they can see on the thermal scan, and then issue a work request to have that issue addressed as well. Next steps, we've had a number of meetings with city officials. We've done the analysis, put together our plans. Generally, the trip saver fuses, the automatic switching schemes, the mid-circuit reclosers, and the vegetation management. Our engineering department working on those designs and expect to get those issued to construction December 31st. And then between now and the first and second quarters of next year, install those trip saver fuses and execute that mid-circuit reclosure installation work, and then the tree trimming on the 2 lines that are still up for trimming. Obviously, we try to get all this kind of work done before the heat and the storm season in the summer. That's the end of that. Turn it over to you if there are questions from the council.
Sounds good. Thank you, Jen. Any questions or discussion? Alderman Gutenkopf.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, my first question is a very simple one. How long does the power have to be off before it counts as an outage? What I frequently hear from residents is that they've lost power for short periods of time quite frequently. And so is there a definition that ComEd uses?
Our definition is a 1-minute outage is an outage. Less than a minute is a momentary outage. And yes, those can be as bad or worse than a long-term outage for customers. 20 years ago, a momentary interruption, we wouldn't have noticed it. Our clocks would have kept going. Our motors would have kept going. But today, with everything microprocessor controlled, computer controlled, those momentary interruptions are enough to trip off the controllers that control those motors and the digital clocks. We do have the ability to investigate those momentary interruptions if there are if there's something that we can go after to address it, be it tree contact, be it a connector that's going bad, something like that, then we'll do that. The way our system is designed, sometimes those momentary outages are caused by the operation of our system. Some of those switches in the field, when they throw over, they can cause customers to see momentary interruptions. So a minute or more, that's going to be tracked as a regular outage. Less than a minute, momentary outage, handled really by 2 different groups in the company, but still something that we can address.
Alderman Mulliner.
Yeah, you and I have talked a lot, so you're well aware of my issues and the issues that the people in the 7th Ward have, and I know that you've put together a plan here as far as trying to address some of those issues. I guess one of the things I'd like you to do is, you explained this special fuse that you've got now, but you've also talked about now putting in mid-circuit reclosers, okay? And one of my concerns, as you've heard me say a number of times, is that there's a certain area down there that's fed from Roosevelt Road, going across Roosevelt Road back into Oak Brook with a single line. We tend to have a lot of problems on that particular circuit, okay? You know which circuit we're discussing. And not most, but a lot of the issues tended to be, not necessarily are now, but tended to be in the Yorkshire Woods area. Therefore, when that line would go down, that area would be down until that whole thing came up. So we would have the entire circuit down. Will these mid-circuit reclosers solve some of those issues?
And this is a case where I might ask Drew, who is in charge of the group that runs the mid-circuit reclosers, to step up.
To answer the question, yes. So the way they're set up is that they kind of isolate the front half and the back half of the circuit. And the way it works on this particular case is, so on 668 X-ray, the circuit we're talking about, if there's an outage at the front half, it'll isolate the front half from the back half and then pick up the back half of the circuit with another feeder right next door, which is 6610 Yankee.
Okay, can you, in order to help everybody else who hasn't had as many discussions as I have with you, explain to them what you mean by the front half and the back half, and also explain where that other circuit is being fed from, so that they understand that there's a different area that it's coming from?
Well, so actually both of the circuits come from our Oak Brook station down near the Expressway, Harger Road, in that area by Yorkshire Woods. They both tend to take different paths coming up to the south part of Elmhurst. So both the circuits now are going to be tied together so that if there's a problem with the front half, which is the Oak Brook side, the south part, on either of those circuits, the back half of those circuits can be picked up by the other circuit that's in the neighborhood automatically. It'll be a momentary outage again. It'll be a couple minutes, a minute or so, but while it switches around, but it'll be picked up automatically.
And I noticed in your chart you had that a number of these different things were going to be done by April, but that one kind of had a little bit longer window of time. What's the time frame on that realistically? Is that the end of summer? I mean, I know you said the hot weather, but are we realistically talking about the end of summer?
No, I mean, the intention is to get it in before June. Those take a little more engineering analysis and design time, so that's why that one's got a little bit later start time.
Okay. Just to make sure that people understand a couple of things, and I just want to make sure that we're clear on a couple of things. You guys are well aware of the fact that our concerns in the 7th Ward, everybody understands that when we have these major storms like we had in June and July, there's going to be power outages, there's no question. The concerns that people have are those power outages that are happening on perfectly clear days, days when we shouldn't be having those power outages. If you go around and did a survey down in the 7th Ward, I'll bet you minimally every other home has a generator of their own to provide power so that they're able to make sure that they have power. Every neighbor knows, can get into everybody else's house so they can make sure that they don't flood, so that they can make sure they've got power because of the concerns that have been brought forth. I mean, we've been talking about this for a long time, so I really hope that what I'm hearing here is a positive step forward to make some of these problems go away for the community, and I would hope that you're willing to come back to the community and even come back just to the 7th Ward and talk to the people down there and make sure that they understand. We've got a number of those people in this audience right now, but there's still a large number of those people who couldn't make it this evening who would like to hear this presentation. Fortunately, it's going to be televised. But the other thing that I think would be helpful is to have you at some point come down and talk to those people directly and make sure that they understand what your plans are and what the recourse is going to be if those plans don't follow through, because we've had this problem for too long at this point.
And the mid-circuit reclosers will work if the other circuit is available to throw over. If it's a severe storm and takes out multiple feeders and there's nothing to throw to, then it can't throw to the other feeder. But on a blue sky day, if feeder A goes down, in theory, there should be that intelligence between the switches in the field to pick up the customers. Our goal, obviously, is not to have those outages on those blue sky days as well. And that's what the analysis that we've done, is intended to prevent.
Before I go to Alderman Healy, I would also like to ask, you talked about 12 kV versus 4 kV. In the newer subdivisions throughout DuPage and Cook County, what are you installing in those subdivisions, 12 or 4? 12
is our standard. 4 is a system that we have had over the years and still operate and maintain.
Right. And my concern is would it be possible, and I don't know what costs would be, et cetera, but I think a lot of people feel we have an old grid, we have an old system, and 4 kV, again, is not being used in current technology. Seems like we're kind of retrofitting and maybe Band-Aiding. Is there any chance that we can get this whole town on 12 kV, and if there is, what would they cost, et cetera?
I'm going to let Drew take a stab at that.
Really, looking at the numbers, and we showed them up on the slide there for the 4 kV circuits, the reliability is really good on the 4 kV circuits, and there's some reasons for that. Typically, a 4 kV circuit is shorter in length, so it has less overhead, miles of wire out on the system, so there's less chance for trees to fall on it, less chance for lightning strikes, so there's advantages to having that smaller circuit. And the reason that it is shorter is because it can't handle as much load. So it's just a different way of diversifying the load that's in the community. There's really nothing wrong with the 4 kV. And, to your question about new subdivisions, if the subdivision was being put in next to a 4 kV circuit, it would probably be installed at 4 kV.
Right, okay. Because my concern, again, is old technology, and if we're not putting in new subdivisions with 4 kV unless they've got a 4 kV next to it, and that might be a longer-term solution that would fix the problem. I think that might be something we want to look at, especially with the task force we're putting together. And if there's a cost to it, what is it, et cetera? Because I think to some degree people are concerned, are we putting Band-Aids, and what's the cost of the Band-Aid? Probably, it sounds like that's something that you guys are willing to pick up. But if we're looking to revamp the whole system and give us a brand new 12 kV system throughout the whole town, just like the hospital has, what infrastructure we need to redo, and would there be a cost, and what would be the benefits? Because obviously, if these new subdivisions and, you know, when you can create them from scratch or 12 kV, you're doing it for a reason, would be my guess. But Alderman Healy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And my question is along the same lines as Mayor DeCiani. I think where Mayor DeCiani was going, and then also to echo what Alderman Mulliner said about the most residents understanding when there's a major storm, we expect power to go out. The blue sky days are a problem, but then also when the power goes out, it can be up to 3-4 days in length. ComEd is a for-profit company. Your parent company, Exelon, is a for-profit company. There's a perception out there, and I'll be honest, I have it, that less money is being spent on either system upgrades, as Mayor DeCiani alluded to, or tree trimming, or upgrading of equipment. I can think of at least 2 transformers in the 5th Ward right now that the neighbors and the people, you know, that can see the transformers call them rust buckets, because literally the entire transformer is, you know, covered in rust. Can you speak to, preferably specifically, but if not specifically, then in general terms, what is ComEd's preventive maintenance system improvement capital budget? Have you seen the capital budget increase, decrease, manpower hours increase, decrease? Tree trimming, you mentioned, was a contract service. When there's a major storm, contract services can go in many different ways. I guess the perception is that ComEd is spending less money to keep the system up and running. Can you speak to that, whether is that true, is that not true? A little bit about that, please.
And I don't have the exact numbers on this, but you know, in general, our maintenance costs and our capital costs go up every year. I mean, we have our programs are increasing every year. We have cable replacement programs, we have different things like that. I'll jump around a little bit. You talked about like blue sky outages in our tree trimming. So, you know, we trim to the spec. It's typically like a 10-foot kind of a keyhole that we punch through the trees. And the issue we have is that we will trim so that the trees don't grow in and make incidental contact with the wires. During the storms, that's not usually what's happening, right? It's the branch that breaks off and lands on the wires. And so we don't trim to prevent that kind of thing ever. And so what a lot of times happens during the storms is, especially the storms that we had recently, we see all the damage that happens right then and there. And there's trees laying on people's houses in the backyards all over the place. What happens after that is a lot of the branches that didn't fall out of the trees and didn't break off, they broke in the tree and are still sitting there dying. You know, they didn't happen right then and there. So now the weeks and the months afterwards, we see a lot of these blue sky outages. The branch finally dies and then lands on the wires as it falls out of the trees. We do get a lot of that. So one thing that John kind of said, you know, what we look for is also help from the residents, that if they see that, you know, ComEd doesn't own any trees, so if the tree is in the backyard and it has dead branches and stuff that looks like it could be a problem for the wires, we ask that you take care of that and try to get those out of there, because that causes a lot of our outages. I'm trying to think what other questions you had for me.
Capital budget?
Capital
Expense.
preventative
Are you
maintenance.
trimming the same number of trees as you did, say, 7 years ago?
Actually, we trim more as new trees volunteer under the lines. We find like a 10 or 15% ingrowth every cycle in the area. So we'll do removals selectively in conjunction with the municipality or the property owner, but still there's so much ingrowth growing in that, you know, we have more trees to trim every cycle that we trim.
So you're saying you do trim more trees than you have in the past, and equipment replacement, like transformer replacement, line replacement, are you doing more or less of that than you've done in the past? And dollars I know can be tricky because inflation, but number of transformers, yards of cable, whatever you know, feet of cable, is that going up? Is that going down? Is it staying consistent year over year?
So I'd say that the cable replacement is going up. I know that the program that we have keeps increasing every year.
And that means underground cable, replacing cable that's in the ground. The overhead equipment, that's usually caught during those maintenance inspections, And if there's something identified either by one of those programs or one of Drew's reliability engineers, a piece of wire that has had multiple failures, multiple splices, that type of thing, a work request is put through to have that replaced, in response to a visual inspection.
And the transformers you're talking about, so like, the rusty transformer in the backyard, and they, what typically happens is, as the houses get torn down and bigger houses get built, the engineering group will go out and look at it and say, is that transformer big enough to handle the new house? Then maybe the next door neighbor goes next, and they look at it again, is that still big enough to handle it? And they will upgrade the transformers at that time if they need to. The one piece of it is that typically transformers don't cause repeat outages for customers. So if that rusty transformer caused an outage, it would fail and we would replace it. It wouldn't be an ongoing. I mean, there are cases where sometimes it happens, but for the most part, it dies and we replace it.
Alderman Morley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. O'Halloran, for coming tonight. I have a couple of questions. You referred to something, I think you called it a SAFE. Is that your calculation? The one you had up on there is 1.16. Was that the average number of outages per home over 1 year?
Per customer over the year.
Okay. So that's all of the city of Elmhurst. How close or how local can you go with that? Can you do a SAFE calculation based on a couple of square blocks? I mean, how detailed can you get? And I'll follow up the reason when I hear your answer.
We look at our service territory in terms of the circuits, and there are tens of thousands of them, or thousands of them, and we look at the circuit performance, and then we can look at a fuse level and look at the number of customers beyond that. We can look at a transformer performance, the performance of a specific transformer, or we can look at an individual home. There can be issues anywhere along that line where the entire feeder goes down, a fuse level outage, a transformer level outage, or a service level outage. So for those averages, we look at the entire community based on the customers served by those circuits.
So I think I heard you say you could track it down to the transformer even by home, and even by home. So a transformer that I see in the backyard, about how many homes will that serve?
Depends on the size of the home, size of the transformer, say 10.
Okay. That's good to hear. I think, quite frankly, it'd be more important to get those, what you call SAFE calculations, down to maybe square block levels as it relates to Elmhurst. And the reason why I say that is I can appreciate that you grade yourself at a 1.16 in Elmhurst, and I think there's people in the 7th, 5th, and 6th Ward that would kill for a 1.16 failure rating per year. So I'll give you an example. I have power outages at my house, not too frequently, maybe once or twice a year, maybe the 1.16. But after recent storms, I can walk 3 blocks to a neighbor's house. And I said to this one man, well, geez, I didn't have that many problems that went off for a little while. How about you? Well, I've had 7 outages in the past 3 weeks. Well, how do you know that? Well, my baby's 3 weeks old, and I've been counting. 7 outages in the past 3 weeks. So it's very difficult for the members of the audience in certain areas and the citizens of Elmhurst to see a 1.16 calculation. So in the future, I know it would be helpful for me when we are talking about the specific hot spots in the lower part of Elmhurst, the south and central parts of Elmhurst, to get those SAFE calculations down. And then more specifically to this gentleman, when I hear about the trip fuses and the mid-circuit reclosers, I'd really love to see what that equates to. Hey, we got a mid-circuit recloser. Now that my friend over there on Euclid or Washington doesn't have 6 outages in a month and a half. So I appreciate you coming here, and I know you cannot get into that detail tonight, but those are some of the answers I think these people are going to be looking for.
And when we met with the city officials recently, we did show them the SAFE by circuit map, which breaks out the safety by circuit. So that's how we identified, as well as the evidence provided to us, the circuits that met the criteria that got that in-depth review. So we do look at the community-wide safety, and again, it's an average, and like I tell people when I sit down one-on-one with the village and city administrators, you've got people that haven't had an outage for 2 or 3 years, and then they've got the people that have had 7 in a year. So when you average that up over the entire community, you get a safety of 1.16. So Drew's team does look at the safety performance of each of the circuits in the community. That's how we determine that the 4 kV has a good safety record, and these few circuits have a safety record that warrant them to get this kind of review. The other issue, the redundancy with that number of circuits means that, yes, one side of the street is fed by Circuit A, the other side fed by Circuit B. For whatever reason, Circuit A has a number of issues, Circuit B doesn't. Next year, it could be the opposite, where Circuit B has problems, Circuit A doesn't. So there are hard boundaries, if you will, on those circuits that one side of the street, Circuit A, the other side, Circuit B. So that's where we get input from the municipality and says, hey, the west side of the street complaining of outages, the east side not complaining. We take a look at those, at how they're served, and we do determine, yeah, they're on Circuit A, they're on Circuit B. We've had issues on Circuit A. Let's do so-and-so to Circuit A.
Thank you. I'm hoping we can see some measurable differences by adding this infrastructure you've talked about.
So do we.
Alderman Pezza.
Thank you. Just a quick question back to the tree trimming. Do you trim any trees that are encroaching the lines, or is it just the trees that are on the utility easement?
The ones that are encroaching the lines. So
even if it's on a private property, you'll still take care of it?
Right. We'll trim to clear out that 10-foot space. There's different parameters. It's not always 10 feet. It depends on the species of the tree, the diameter of the branches, and how close the wires are.
Okay.
Alderman Brown.
Thank you. I will say that I live on the north side of town, so we haven't seen nearly as much impact, but I also own a generator, and many of my neighbors do as well, because I've experienced myself 2 to 4 day outages on some of these storms, which, as Alderman Healy and Alderman Mullen already mentioned, it's to be expected that you're going to see some outages on some big storms. But really what I want to get at here is I think there's a lot of concern or rumors going on how or if the new hospital will impact the power grid on the south side of town. So if you could spend a few minutes on what is the plan for the new hospital on the south side, and will it be shared with residents, or is it going to be on its own separate grid or circuit, and just dispel any rumors that may or may not be out there with the oncoming new hospital.
The hospital contacted us, asked for 2 separate feeds, 34,000 volt, really a sub-transmission line that that goes to their property. We've installed the facilities. The lines are hot and serving load down there. They're on. They come in off of Butterfield from 2 separate substations, and they're not for the hospital alone, but they're feeding the hospital. They're not on the 12 kV lines that feed the area, and that was as engineered and requested by the hospital for that specific level of service off the 34,000 volt lines.
So the residents won't be fed off of those same circuits that the hospital will be fed off of, is what I'm hearing.
Correct.
Okay. Thank you.
Anybody else? Questions, discussion? City Manager Borcher.
If John or Drew, could you elaborate? There was a lot of questions that you folks did answer as it related to the power that comes to the residential side of the south end of town from the community south of Elmhurst. Those power lines go through the woods, the Forest Preserve District woods, and I think some of the work that Commonwealth Edison has done to improve the ability of those lines to not be adversely affected is to your credit, and if you could explain a little bit about what you've done. Never there's a guarantee, but what you have done does improve the possibility of those lines being less susceptible going forward.
All right, bring a good point. So where 668 X-ray comes from the south in Oak Brook, it goes around Yorkshire Woods. It actually literally goes right around the Forest Reserve. That was a trouble spot in the past where the trees would break off and land on the wires and cause outages to everybody up north of there. So last year, actually probably the year before, we started some of this, but we installed a very tree-resistant wire that runs around that Forest Reserve area there. It's made to withstand tree branches laying on the wires and being able to bounce off and not affecting the customers. So that was installed already. You know, unfortunately, even during this last June storm, I mean, that whole system came down. We had 10 poles that were down because the trees were that devastating at that time. But in general, that will help improve some of the issues that we've had with trees in that south end down there.
And north of there, as we've talked before, as part of bringing in those 34,000 volt lines for the hospital, we replaced a number of poles and reconducted the 12,000 volt line that is physically under the 34,000 volt line, and trim the trees to accommodate all this insulation. So in the section north of Roosevelt, south of Butterfield, there are a number of new poles, new wire that had been run as part of the installation of those 34,000 volt lines of the hospital. And that's that main piece of the circuit as it goes north toward the residential area.
Very good. Alderman Brown.
Yeah, just to follow up on that, so that current 12 kV circuit would have less of a load now, correct? Since the hospital's now allocated its own lines, and some of that power is now removed from that circuit. Some of the, what are they called? Mid-circuit reclosers, right, Alderman Morley? Would be available. Let me rephrase here. Though I think that's good in theory, as long as there's a circuit available to jump over to. In those spots that you're implementing these mid-circuit reclosers, is there always an available circuit? If not one, are there many, being at least two compared to just one to jump over?
So when we look at the options of where we can transfer the load back and forth, our capacity planning department gets involved, and they look at the summer peak loads and where we have to install those physically on the line to say, okay, this number of customers, this much load, that's the max I can flip over to the other side. So they evaluate that and put it in so it's in place like that. You know, the hospital load, there is actually still some of the outlot buildings that are served for the hospital off of 668 X-ray that are down there. The loading didn't change too much on that circuit, one way or the other. I mean,
it did not.
No. And loading was never really the issue. I mean, like I said, again, the planning department looks at that and makes sure that that's not an issue. They look at that every year.
All righty. Out of respect for time and knowing that we have committees to go to, I will conclude the ComEd presentation. We thank you, Mr. O'Halloran, and all the folks from ComEd for coming out. We are looking for answers. This is going to be an ongoing process. The committee will have a subgroup dedicated strictly to this issue. We have the largest senior base population in DuPage County. Those seniors need air conditioning. They have equipment at their homes, and power goes out. We got problems. We have families that this is a huge inconvenience for. It's concentrated, obviously, on the south side of town. I grew up on the north side. This was never really an issue growing up as well. And I look at all the folks in the audience, and the majority of those folks with ComEd issues are south. And we definitely need to get this resolved. So we appreciate your help, and it will be an ongoing issue. City Manager Porcher.
This is a committee of the whole meeting, and the PowerPoint committee of the whole meeting, city council meetings do end up being posted on the city website for viewing. You know, if folks would like to share the information with the neighbor would be able to look at the city website and go to that and see tonight's presentation. In addition, the PowerPoint, without the meeting format, but the PowerPoint itself will be posted on the city's website as a PowerPoint presentation relative to the Mayor's Task Force on Stormwater and Stormwater Planning, as power is certainly a big part of that. So the basic PowerPoint will be available, and tonight's committee of the whole meeting will be available on the city website.
Very good. Real quick, I will ask for a motion to adjourn, but just before I do that, task force members, please stay here. They will answer, ComEd will answer questions that you have until about 8:15. Again, at that point, the selection committee for the stormwater engineer will meet. Committees will be meeting between now, we'll call it 8:20, because we were about 5 minutes behind her. So having said, ask for a motion to adjourn, please. Alderman Gutenkopf with Alderman Hipskin in a second. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Anybody opposed? We're adjourned.